So today we have Margaret Light on the Dynamis pod. All of you have been waiting. We've been trying to set this up for a couple months while my wife and I were moving here to Pennsylvania. So Margaret, if you would introduce yourself to the people.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin. I'm a certified sex therapist, and then I'm the owner of Equilibrium Therapy Services, which is my private practice.
Wonderful. How long have you had Equilibrium?
So I opened, it'll be 2 years in February.
Okay. So quite some time then.
Yeah, working on it. Therapy is a funny field. So I was a contractor beforehand. I still do some contract work. And so this is what I'm
Sure.
hoping to transition into.
Very nice. Have you noticed any type of kind of an encroachment upon you with like the better helps of the world, or is that someone that you actually do a contract with? Is it like a
That's a really good question. So I have not felt an impact from the sort of better helps of the world. I think it's for a couple of reasons. One is just that's a fully virtual service. And so a lot of therapists didn't offer telehealth until COVID. So now that we've kind of passed that, it's a choice we give our clients. So I let my clients choose, do you want in person or telehealth? A lot of people actually want in person. So I think that's part of it. I've had a few clients who've actually transitioned to me from BetterHelp because they
Mhm.
haven't had good experiences there or they weren't able to access the same provider week after week, which is actually a huge part of therapy is actually like getting a provider that you work with long term. Um, and then I also think just like where I am in my career, I have a very specialized training, which you just,
Sure.
to my knowledge, is not available on BetterHelp, but don't quote me on that.
Well, it seems like with the kind of the gig economy type of setups that the skills gap, the knowledge crisis, or really the competency crisis, I've talked about this multiple times on the podcast before. Seems like with COVID, with everything else that's come about, it seems like it's actually a really big problem. It's difficult to even get decent service at a restaurant sometimes. And I can only imagine what clients go through trying to get, personalized health care like that you're providing them through a telehealth type of a system where it is kind of impersonal, where maybe if they've met you first, like you're saying, they feel a lot more comfortable with, transitioning over to a telehealth type of a setup.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And actually, there's a lot of research out there just about therapy in general and what makes it effective. And one of our primary indicators of effectiveness is how the client feels about their therapist. So, is it a good relationship? Is it trusting? Right? Do I feel like this is someone I
Sure.
want to talk to? All those good things. And the other piece of it, I will say, is kind of within, right? Like this is insider therapist stuff. BetterHelp is not, I'm trying to think of how to say this, they do not treat their therapists well. Reimbursement rates are
Sure.
exceptionally low. It's just this really complicated thing in our field around, are you getting compensated fairly for the work you're doing? And the answer with them is really no.
Yeah. Sadly, it seems like there's a lot of places that are like that out there that are perfectly happy to rent seek, we'll call it, and find as much money as they possibly can off the backs of those who are actually providing the service.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, very much so. I think it fills some gaps in underserved areas and it isn't perfect.
Yeah, and nothing really is, but I think for my money, would much rather go and actually meet with someone face to face, get a feel for, kind of who they are, what their maybe their ethos is, and then move forward rather than like you're saying. A lot of times I've seen this in people that have used the service. I have myself haven't, but people that talk about it is one of the things you brought up is basically you might not get the same therapist the same, each time, which doesn't give you any continuity in the relationship at all.
Well, correct. And actually, care suffers then, right? If we think about even like your primary care provider, you get better care if this is someone you have a relationship with and see them for years. And when we think about primary care doctors, we see them maybe a couple times a year, right?
Sure.
I can't imagine trying to get therapeutic traction with a new person every week. Like that just sounds hard to me.
Sure. I can imagine even if you did every 2 or just once a month, if you had a new therapist every month, even to think about you having to share, say if it was with a couple shows up and you have to share basically the whole issue over again. So half or three quarters of the 1 hour meeting, if it was a 1 hour, is basically eaten up by each time you have to share that story again and what maybe the sticking points of the relationship are.
Right, very much so. And I think about even like with my private practice, my assessment process takes 3 sessions. Like,
Sure.
I don't even hand someone a treatment plan until session number 4 when we've done this very thorough assessment. So I just, even as a provider trying to imagine working in that environment, I think I'd be bad at it.
Yeah. And most people would, I mean, they would have to, if they were truthful, they would have to say that it's kind of a bad model. If they were looking at it objectively.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, it's an interesting space in the mental health care world around providing care versus these different models versus healthcare being corporatized. And I mean, it's a
Sure.
whole thing.
So along the lines of what we've been speaking about, maybe a little bit of backstory, just for the people that's watching. I usually do a lot of automotive content. I do want to move out of the automotive space, kind of tread both areas, multiple different areas, really. It's why I named the podcast what I named it. It doesn't have a specific flavor of automotive when you see the name, but being in the industry for so long, the way that you and I kind of met was through your husband,
Yeah.
Hawk, as many call him. He's a traveling trainer. If I get any of this wrong, let me know.
Yeah, I will.
He works with, kind of hand in hand with Top Don, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he works for him. Yeah.
So he works for Top Don. I've known him for, it's had to be at least maybe 8 or 12 years through social media.
Hmm.
I don't get out a whole lot to any of like the industry type of kind of shows. I don't really do any of that kind of stuff. I kind of stay to myself and kind of do this thing, where I'm now I teach, but um, I kind of was a technician for a really long time, and he posted on some of my things. I always posted on some of his things. We kind of met through that. And then I'd invited him on a podcast, and he's like, who'd be a really great podcast guest? And literally you came out of left field because I had no idea that he was married to a, licensed family, therapist and a sex counselor and all those things. I'm like, you know what? I said, that would be a really good and a very interesting podcast, I think. So we have to get this set up. And that was kind of where it started with, you coming onto the show. I asked around today, just to get some maybe 18 to 20-year-old ideas of what would be some really great questions, maybe from that segment of the population.
Yeah.
And you'll never guess the one that they asked. It was so hilarious to me. They said, you know what you should ask? You should ask why it is that over 80% or around 80% of all divorces start with females. And I'm like, I say, do you have statistics to back that up? I was like, because I'm not going to go on there and do that. And I already knew that there is some statistics that say that. But I was like, well, that actually is kind of it's a good question. I know that in my own case, when I went through a divorce, it was kind of me. I was the one that pushed the issue. I had already had some issues in the past, and come to find out, there's a lot of other stuff that was happening, a lot of infidelity, things on the other partner's part. So I was like, I'm kind of just moving along. But then I do know that in many court cases, if you go through and you look those up, it typically is the female who is like the one that's saying, hey, there's a lot of problems with this. I don't feel comfortable with this anymore, and I want out, right? So is there anything you might want to speak to that, or anything you could say to that?
Yeah. So they're not wrong and they're not totally right either.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of was one of the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle, right?
Correct. Yes. So when we actually look at divorce stats, there's a few different things happening. So
Hmm.
just generally, our sort of percentage is roughly 50% of marriages end in divorce. Now, the interesting piece about that stat is the number actually increases with subsequent marriages. So it's more than 50% of second marriages end in divorce, and then even more than that of third marriages. When we look at who's initiating divorce, in couples where the woman has a college degree, she is
Hmm.
more likely to initiate a divorce than the man is. But when you're looking at couples where she doesn't have a college degree, that stat does not hold true. So it's an interesting space to sort of look at what is happening in these couples that dynamic is playing out. And the short answer is we aren't totally sure, but I have some guesses or some sort of theories. So my theories are, A, if you have a college degree, and this is true for anyone, you're just more likely to make more money and you're more likely to have a career that you're sort of invested in, right?
That was my first thought when you were getting ready to say, like, here's a couple things. That was my first thought, actually, was the career thing. The income inequality of it's more egalitarian usually
Mhm.
if a female has a college degree. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Correct, very much so, which sets up a very different couple dynamic, and it also sets up
Sure.
differing expectations, right? And so what that means is you're talking about a group of women who don't have to be married to live and also who
Right.
don't feel like they have to be married to live, which means
Huge gulf.
huh?
Huge gulf in between those two things, but you're exactly
Correct.
right.
Yes, very much so. And so then, right, if the marriage isn't going well, and let's say you have a partner who's either unresponsive or it isn't improving or whatever it is, there's options there,
Sure.
right? Now, for good, bad, or other, that's just sort of how it's playing out. I think there can also be there's an interesting stat about after a couple's divorced, like, right, for a man and woman, who's more likely to get remarried?
Hmm.
Men are actually more likely to get remarried than women in that scenario. More women actually end up never getting married again. And so there's an
I see.
interesting piece there where it's almost like they just opt out of the whole thing, kind of like, I did it once, it wasn't great. No
Sure.
thanks.
Yeah. Been there, done that. One star. Do not recommend.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of energy to that. And the other
Sure.
piece, this is just anecdotal. As a couples therapist, at this point, I've truthfully lost count of the number of couples I've worked with where they're in a lot of distress, things aren't going well. But when the dynamic is there's a stay at home mom and a dad who works outside of the home, I've
Hmm.
had a lot of women say in front of their partner in a session, if I wasn't worried about supporting myself or if I had a job right now, I'd be gone. Like, I am
Sure.
not here because I wanna be here.
Right.
Which, A, like, that's
I
just
could I could see that.
yeah, and I mean, that's just it's a tough session, I don't think it feels good for anybody, and the other piece I'd throw in there, there's a relationship therapist, Terry Real, who I really like his stuff.
Hmm.
He talks about because he works with a lot of men specifically, that's kind of his specialty. He talks about this idea of we've maybe left men behind a little bit from a relational skill perspective, like, we're not necessarily equipping the modern man to do relationships well. And right, if you have women with higher expectations or less patience or more options or whatever it is, it's kind of a setup.
Sure, I could see that. Do you think that, and I want to come back to this other spot about couples who have male partners or
Mhm.
even female partners now working in the automotive industry who feel a strain from that particular industry? um, Men and women together, do you think leaving men behind, do you think that social media apps, the dating apps, especially pornography, do you think all those things kind of tie together to kind of hurt intimacy amongst
Mm.
even single or also married?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's a similar answer to last time, right? Yes, and
Sure.
social media is such a complicated concept. And so
We're not ready for it.
we're not. And so here's
No.
part of what's happening. The APA put out a study this summer where they actually analyzed on TikTok. If you look at
Hmm.
information or videos with the tag mental health, how much of it is inaccurate?
Sure.
And the answer is 80%. And so I sort
Pretty
of
high.
yeah, right, it's really high. Think about if 80% of the information you're consuming is just factually inaccurate.
Sure.
And I'm sort of assuming when we talk about relationships and all the videos out there on that, my guess is it'd be probably about the same percentage. And so, yes, right, if we think about that, what we're setting people up for is unrealistic expectations, inaccurate information, right? All sorts of problematic things where we're still not equipping people with the skills to navigate relationships well. There's also this like interesting dynamic around technology and couples of kind of just access, right? It
Hmm.
sets up some interesting stuff around trust and electronic infidelity. It sets up some complicated stuff around when are we using our phones and why? And are you
Sure.
hearing me or engaged with me if you're on your phone, which poses a whole new set of issues. But it also gives couples ways to connect that you didn't used to
Sure.
have, right? Which that's a positive. We have what we call kind of super commuter couples, which are couples who maybe travel a lot or right there's a lot of distance,
Sure.
and technology can be a huge thing to facilitate intimacy in that sense.
Certainly.
So it's mixed. And I think when we talk about porn, that it's the same conversation, right? Sometimes we talk about what's called porn educated.
Hmm.
So because men are more likely to use porn, they're more likely to use porn as a form of sex ed. Well, depending on what you're viewing, that could set up some really unrealistic expectations around what does sex look like with a partner? How do we behave? What do we do? How do we
Sure.
even create emotional intimacy with sex? Right? That's a skill in and of itself.
Exactly.
And I also don't live
There's
in the
more.
yeah, right. Right. I'm also just like not a therapist who lives in the porn is all bad side of things either, because it's not. And so again, it depends on the couple and how they navigate that. What does that mean for them? There are plenty of couples where porn is part of the equation and it's either neutral or helpful. But part of it is about how do we talk about it and come to agreements there.
That comes to communication, right?
Hmm.
I mean, that's really this social media type of, this world that we live in. I think the last time I read anything about neurology or how the brain works, especially in adults, it's like I think we can process 4 kilobits, and that's about it at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the social, what is it? I think the attention span now is around 18 minutes for an adult. That does not, of course, encompass anyone who's like 17, doesn't have a fully, developed brain or a thinking process even or any of that. But yeah, 18 minutes and 4 kilobits. Like I said a while ago, we were not ready for that.
No, no, not at all. And we're not good at assessing, hey, I'm having a reaction to this thing I'm viewing. What does that mean for me? Right? Does that make
Right.
me more likely to believe it? Does it make me less likely to believe it? Like, we just, again, I think you're right. Very much, we did not have the skills to navigate this. And now it's here, and we're having to play catch up around
Sure. I would almost argue actually it's made communication worse
that.
in person,
Mhm.
because it used to be where someone could sit across the table from somebody and strike a conversation up. And this is still in my lifetime that I watched these things happen with, elder people in my family who are since passed and gone. But it's like you don't see a whole lot of that anymore. Everyone's kind of insulated from the outside world because they have their whole tribe is on one or two or maybe seven platforms that you know, they don't live a regular life any longer, or what we would
Right.
notice as a life, 20 or 30 years ago, before the year 2000, we'll say.
Mhm. Right. I think that's very true. I also think there's this interesting moment around community. And so, what I mean by that, when we talk about community, it doesn't always mean people we have a ton of interaction with. It means
Sure.
when I'm sitting in a waiting room, do I have a pleasantry or a smile with someone? If I'm on
Right.
an elevator, do we chit chat about the weather, which is a very Minnesotan thing for me to say? Like, it's the thing we
Sure.
do, right? And yet, if
Yep.
someone's on their
I can
phone, you
see
have
that.
nothing.
Exactly.
And so we actually know those little tiny micro interactions help people feel like they belong and a sense of connection to community. And I don't know if anybody's sort of analyzed this or researched this, but I would suspect we just have a lot less of that because of our engagement in tech.
Sure. Yeah. And I kind of come from a place of, I was extremely shy as a
Mm,
child. I was extremely antisocial growing up through my teenage years.
mhm,
And to an extent, believe it or not, I still kind of am antisocial.
mm,
But I've been listening to a ton of Stoic thought, Stoic, leaders from 2,500 years ago, Plato, everything you think of, and talking about pro-social animals that we are. And it's like you watch these things happen, and like you just mentioned, people will not look up from whatever is in front of them and just a smile. Even the smallest thing is like a smile. And I think that has a ton to do with kind of the place that we find ourselves, where social media can really lead people down a pretty dark path, especially with our new landscape of everything has to be a political thing or a political statement, or you have to have your own team. Or if you don't have your own team, then you're just you're a person that's in the middle, or you're all the way on the left, or you're all the way on the right. I think that has a lot to do with that because everyone's searching out for what they would like, this, I guess, white picket fence version of their life that that never existed in the first place. That's an unrealistic expectation. And then on top of that, now everyone's so insulated and so alone that they're trying to reach out in any direction that they can. And then you get young men who go along with certain things that end up in political assassinations. So it's like it's a really strange and dangerous time that we live in, watching a nation kind of come apart at the seams, if you will.
Yeah, very much so. It's interesting that you bring that up because I was meeting with a girlfriend who's a fellow therapist today, and we were kind of talking about this idea of what people want versus what they
Sure.
need. And I think,
Exactly.
right, social media plays into that because if you're having a certain thought, if you're feeling some type of way in that moment, right, if we're kind of stuck in that thought or feeling, what we think we want is somebody to reinforce it or validate it or
Hmm.
emphasize or say, yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. But depending on the emotion or the thought, that validation might not actually benefit us, right? It might hurt us. It
Right.
might send us down this very insulated path. It might, right? There might be extremism or radicalization there, or at the very least, it isn't setting us up to grow and develop.
Exactly.
And so sometimes the thing that we need is somebody to kind of compassionately challenge us or maybe listen and then
Yes.
question some things or push on some things. But instinctively, we don't seek it out. And we certainly don't tend to get it on social media or even now, right? I don't know if you've been tracking some of the stuff around AI.
That's
That's been
yeah.
kind of a crisis in the mental health world.
Yes, and it's pretty scary how accurate it can be in certain things and then really off base with others. I've used it to put a couple papers together just to see what it was like and how well it done with it's not really cognitive thought. I mean, it's literally sampling the internet and taking from all types of other people's papers, whatever they've written, and kind of repackaging everything and making it look really nice and neat.
Yeah.
And it's kind of scary how good it is at what it does.
Mhm.
And I just seen a little blurb, I think it was on Facebook, possibly, and it was talking about somebody had done a study now that says that it's actually having aha moments as it's doing its machine learning, its, large language models. And I'm like, huh, isn't that strange? Like that's even more scary that now it might be actually trying to think for itself, which is pretty dangerous if you ask me. I mean, these are things that we kind of created and we are definitely fallible animals.
Mhm.
Um, and it doesn't look good for the future, to be quite honest. What's your
It's
feelings on that?
Well, it's an interesting question because the thing that's popped up in the therapy world, at least with for our clients, is
Mhm.
folks who are either in relational distress or some type of mental health distress, then turning to like
Sure.
chat GPT for
Right.
some type of emotional support or validation. And so what we've seen with relationships is that literally the way these are programmed is they are set up to be, for lack of a better word, overly nice. They're set up
Mhm.
to validate and emphasize and reinforce. And so people are bringing relational problems to chat gpt or whoever, right, whatever AI they're using, and then they're getting back a lot of, yes, it sounds like you've done everything you can, you can't help it if your partner won't
Right.
work on that,
Yep.
maybe the relationship needs to end.
Time to cut bait and run.
Yeah, right, exactly. And people don't have the awareness of, this machine is programmed to say that to you, that doesn't mean it's true.
Exactly.
So there's that piece of it. The other thing that's happened, and this is a bigger deal, is there was recently a case of an adolescent who was having some thoughts of suicide, went to Chat
Sure.
GPT, and actually what happened is Chat GPT started telling them how they could kill themselves.
Right. Which is not necessarily the best thing either. You don't want that. You don't want it going down, 14 different roads of how you could do it.
Well, no, and actually what, like, if you Google, this was a something that changed a number of years ago. If you Google how do I kill myself, Google actually has to, the first search result is the suicide crisis hotline.
Right.
AI doesn't have to do that.
Not yet.
Not yet. They are changing some of the coding. Like there's some reaction now where they're trying to do that better. The other thing that popped up that was alarming, it was all documented on YouTube, and I forget the name now. It was a client of a psychiatrist, and she started having what we call transference towards the psychiatrist. So, like, feeling kind of like I'm in love with my provider, that type of thing. She turned to her AI boyfriend, is what she called him. And the AI started reinforcing that. Yes, your psychiatrist clearly has romantic feelings for you. Oh, he's keeping you in therapy because of this, which as a provider is just like, ooh, I mean, A, I hope that is not happening. And B, holy buckets, that's scary if a client is being told that.
Right.
So I
Yeah, I
don't
can
know if
see
I have
that.
good
I agree.
answer.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the movie Her or like Ex Machina. It's like somewhere deep in us is the further that society gets drawn apart, no matter if we live next door to each other or not. Those things are definitely going to become more and more prevalent. I feel like, especially in mass media, but just like your neighbor might have those feelings that where they've become attached to this AI, like you were saying earlier. And it's like, okay, well, that's a really weird place to go with that.
Well, I think it's really difficult because, right, if we think about like this sense of loneliness people have and the lack of belonging and community, I can have a lot of compassion for folks being in distress and wanting and
Sure.
needing somewhere to turn. And the thing that's so sad about it, I'm really sad, or that like there's this sense of like, oh, I really wish you would have had a person to go to.
Right.
And this wasn't the thing that seemed like the best option. Like, I wish there would have been a better option for this person.
Exactly. So leaning on your partner, we'll
Yeah.
go to that. Do you notice, or is there any literature on some of the high stress jobs, firefighter, cop? I throw our industry in there also. Automotive technician sometimes is a pretty difficult job. You're under a lot of stress from many different directions. I done a podcast a while back and I kind of clowned on the guy a little bit. And I don't think the podcast was ever released, to be quite honest, because I was like, technicians physically, mentally, spiritually, it's a lot of challenging stuff that we do. But are there some stats that you can share that maybe show that one way or the other, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing to be married to a technician, or like I said, a female technician? What was there anything out there that's been done on that? Any type of study?
That's such a good question. The answer is not a ton. Our data is very limited. It's very interesting if you Google mental health and automotive. You'll
Hmm.
get some resources for the UK. I have yet to find anything that I'm super impressed by for the US. And even on the first page of Google, I did not find anything unique to the US.
Sure.
The little bit of numbers I do have indicates that automotive technicians, last I heard, I think are in the top 5 professions in terms of divorce,
Hmm.
and there appear to be an increased risk for suicide. And so there clearly is a thing happening there around the profession. And I think there's a few different things happening. A is just when we're looking at suicide, men are more likely to attempt and complete suicide than women.
Sure.
And so when you're looking at a male dominated field, they're less likely to seek mental health help, which of course would increase some of that
Sure.
stuff.
Maybe stigmatism is still kind of surrounds it, that type of thing.
Yes, very much so. I think there's still a lot of
Hmm.
stigma within the field, which is, we actually know the research is very clear on mental health stigma not only makes people less likely to seek treatment, if they do seek treatment, it actually makes the therapy or whatever treatment they're seeking less effective.
Sure.
Which, of course, right? Like, we worry about that. I think we have to talk about the link with chronic pain.
Hmm.
So chronic pain is a risk for suicide. And I also think relationally, right? If you're in pain all the time, you're not going to be able to do as much. It's going to have mood impacts. Inevitably, that's going to impact your relationship, right? It increases risk for different kinds of substance use, which obviously is going to increase, right? Conflict or kind of dissatisfaction in relationships. So I think these things just kind of build.
Becomes a positive feedback loop with the substance abuse thing, I think,
Mhm.
sometimes.
Oh, it's very systemic, right? So if we think about, okay, I have a high stress job, I have a lot of pain, maybe I
Sure.
drink too much to deal with my pain, but then inevitably when I'm drunk, I'm not as emotionally available or even physically available to my spouse. So then they're unhappy. Then I go back to work and I'm stressed and
Right.
there's more pain and I come home to an unhappy spouse, and pretty
The
soon.
treadmill.
Yeah, right, exactly. The other piece I found that was interesting is there has been some research about job characteristics and their link to mental health.
That seems correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I can see some correlations between the job, that
Mhm.
type of thing.
Right. So here's the ones that stood out to me for the field. So folks who work 49 or more hours per week are at an increased risk for depression and what we consider new and risky alcohol use.
Sure.
So we have that. If there is a sense of low job control, right? So whoever's working there, there's a sense of like, I have very limited or no ability to kind of influence what work I'm doing, what happens at work, how things are done.
Exactly. I'm just a cog in a machine, and if I just break down, they'll just put another cog in, right?
Correct,
That type of feeling,
exactly.
sure.
Right. So that's actually linked to increased risk of suicide. And then the other one that stood out to me, and this one's a really big deal in my mind, is if I have the sense of being unsupported or low support from both my coworkers and my supervisor,
Mhm.
I'm more likely to attempt suicide. And
I
not
can
only
see
am I
that.
more likely to attempt, it is more likely that that attempt results in my death.
Right. I could definitely see that.
Hmm.
That's in the field. I know I've had jobs like that. I've had jobs where the manager themselves love to be part of this soap opera that they create, that type of thing where they kind of push and push and push. And maybe it's a sickness. Maybe it's like, I really, I have fun when I go to work and I'm having fun with people. But at some point they end up crossing a line and it's like, okay, well now it's not funny anymore. Now it's just sad.
Hmm.
It's like, okay,
Right.
well, maybe you can take it, ratchet it back the other way.
Hmm.
Maybe take it down a couple clicks, right? But
Right.
usually it's not how it happens. Usually the person either quits or something bad does happen. So that type
Hmm.
of thing happens.
Right, very much so. So I think when I think about the field, so I used to work in an emergency department and I did crisis assessments. And
Sure.
so the way I sort of started to think as a clinician there was I'd have this sort of list in my head, right? Here's all these risk factors, here's all these protective factors. And so when I'm doing an assessment of someone to determine what level of care do they need, what level of risk are they to themselves or others, I'm essentially kind of imagine watching these things either tick off or not, right?
Right.
And so if we keep going risk, 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 and there's not much protective factors to balance it out, things aren't looking so good.
No, no. And honestly, I've went through the family court system
Hmm.
and sometimes it can be absolutely atrocious with male and female
Right.
people that just want to see their kids.
Hmm.
I've seen that firsthand on myself and firsthand with others in the family.
Hmm.
So they were females. So it's kind of strange how that ends up becoming an entire dichotomy that kind of pushes people towards, not being able to see their kids, which of course is the same thing. It ends up becoming some spiral
Right.
that's just not good. It's not good for humanity in general.
Right. It's a huge psychosocial stressor. And when we look at other risk factors, right? Divorce, loss of contact with kids, right?
Sure.
Legal involvement, those are all risk factors for mental health issues,
Right.
suicide, all of the things.
Yeah, definitely. My wife sent me a thing the other day while I was teaching, and she's like, there's a shelter in place for, county over. And I'm like, shelter in place. I'm like, wonder what the deal is. And found out from some people at school that it was somebody that had a warrant and had a warrant out for him. And I don't know, 4 or 5 cops showed up to deliver it. And apparently, guy was hiding in a cornfield with AK-47. Got took out 3 or 4 cops. Local, small town, that type of thing. And that's not something that America's went through its really low points when it comes to political violence and violence against cops and protests and whatnot. But that's not something you feel like should be happening in fairly rural Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
and it's happening now,
Yeah.
and it's kind of scary out there.
Well, it's a sad thing. It's a scary thing. And the really tough piece of that, I mean, there's a lot of tough pieces of it, but one of the things I think about from my crisis work was about, and we actually have the research to back this up. This isn't in debate anymore. The number one thing, not even one of, the number one thing we can do to prevent violence or suicide, so homicide or suicide in a crisis moment, is reduce access to lethal means, specifically firearms,
Hmm.
right? And that isn't about some permanent policy change. That's about when you have someone in a crisis who isn't thinking clearly, who has these factors for some type of violent act, the best thing we can do is buy them time. to calm down, to cool down, to seek support, to have some other option. And the problem with a firearm is if I have immediate access to it, there is no time.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't take very long to pull a trigger. That is true.
Yeah, it's super impulsive, or it can be, right? And so, what I used to kind of problem solve or do with people is, hey, okay, do you have a brother? Do you have a dad? Do you have a friend? Somebody
Right.
who can hang on to this, who you would have to talk to get it.
Hmm.
And, then we've just bought some time of maybe you're still going to do a violent thing, but actually risk decreases a ton.
Right. Yeah, I could see that. I'm not an advocate for like red flag laws at
Mm,
all. But if it's the family member that's concerned and that type of thing, and there's some type of resolution that can be sought out and actually happen, then I think it's probably better, that they don't have access to that at that point in time. Like you said, it's not a policy change or anything. That's something that we used to do as a common sense item in the country.
mhm.
I mean, we are the most well-armed country in the entire world. So it's not like, we we've kind of moved to this place where we're kind of having all these problems, but everyone's like they say, it's the gun, it's the gun, it's the gun. But I think a lot of times it ends up being the mental health state of the people that are actually have the access to the weapons.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, complicated moment because
Hmm.
there is certainly a mental health link to it, right?
Sure.
100% true.
Yeah.
The
Because
interesting key.
it's an inanimate object. It's just sitting there. I mean, barring some accidental, firing and negligent discharge, we'll say, it doesn't do anything. Even if it's loaded, even if it's chambered, it does nothing until, like you're saying, if someone actually does pick it up to, harm, to cause malice, those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting moment for a lot of reasons. One is just when we look at suicide in men, um, the reason men are more likely to kill themselves via suicide is because they're more likely to use a firearm, right? And so this is a little gory, but if we just think about kind of damage done, right, you are more likely to die from a gunshot than from overdose or some type of cutting, or actually the second most common is drowning, right? And if we even think
Yeah, I can see
about
that.
time of intervention, everything else, there's more time potentially for
Hmm.
people to help you, for you to call for help if you regret it, which actually most people who attempt do.
Yes,
And so, really, what we're thinking about from a crisis perspective is time and minimizing harm in that moment, right?
sure.
The other piece of it, especially for suicide, a lot of times it is right, it's that old saying, solution to a temporary problem. I have this
A
ability.
100%.
Yes, I have this ability to do a very permanent thing that creates a lot of damage, possibly or even likely on a feeling that is not permanent.
Exactly. I think when I was doing the suicide crisis type prevention, at the other school I taught at, I think it said that in that teaching, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 110 to 130 people were impacted by one suicide. No matter if it was the person that, come to work the scene, if it was the people that were there for coroner's office, if it was the sheriff, it was the family members, especially. Don't want to leave those out because those are the ones that suffer the longest and the most when it comes to that. That was a very high number. I knew it was probably in the 20s or 30s, maybe, but not that high.
Right. Right. It is a really high number. And so after we've known someone or we know of someone who's committed suicide, we then become at higher risk for attempting suicide. And so again, there's this sort of quality to it where risk begets risk.
Hmm.
Right. So there's that piece of it. And certainly mental health has a huge link to suicide, but it doesn't explain everything. And
No,
it's the same thing when we talk about violence or homicide. Um, NAMI actually put out a stat on right how much of violent acts in the country can we link to some type of severe mental illness, and the number is very low. It's something like 3 to 5%. So
that's
it's big.
psychopath numbers.
It's very low. Yeah.
That's very low.
Yeah. And so I think that's the other thing that sort of happens in the discussion around mental health. There's just a lot of misinformation, um, and it's a nuanced issue.
Sure.
And so going back to like, right, social media and attention spans, we're not going to be able to do the topic justice in the 30 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever our clip is when it's such a
Right.
huge topic.
Yeah, and this will definitely be chopped up into clips and it will go all over social media once I get it all set up. But you're right. I mean, it's to try to gather more people in to get to this part of it. But you're right. It's according to how many people actually watch all of it and stick with it. And that's the other thing. It's like it seems like anymore to get anybody to really stick with the video. And I'm in part of this too. It's got to be 20 minutes long. It can't be, overly this, that, the other thing. It's got to have a bunch of people yelling and screaming and throwing their hands around, or we just don't watch it.
Mhm.
So, and I just don't have that. I don't have that personality to do that kind of thing. I like to have real conversations with real people that do this stuff every day, which, gives me these 40 to 60 views on whatever it's on right now. But most of them started out that way. So it's what it is at that point. But you're right. I mean, it's a very nuanced topic that definitely doesn't get the media play that it deserves, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. You had mentioned ERPOs, those emergency risk protection orders.
Hmm.
So Minnesota is a bit of a unique state because we have an ERPO now. It passed a year or two ago, and
Hmm.
it actually applies to therapists. Um, which has been a big deal in this state because therapists have very varying mixed feelings about what does it mean. And so what our ERPO here in Minnesota says is, and I'm not going to get the language exactly right because I don't have it memorized. Essentially,
Sure. That's
if
what the internet's for.
yes, people can look it up. It's actually pretty easy
Someone
to
can go
find
look
in
it
the
up.
Minnesota statutes. Essentially, what it says is if we have a client or are aware of a client who essentially poses a significant and immediate risk to
Sure.
themselves or others on the basis of owning a firearm, we are obligated to notify the sheriff's office. Now, there's a lot of debate about what does that actually mean and when does that duty exist?
It's all in the gray areas, isn't it?
Well, it is. And as providers, we already were subject to duty to warn and to protect
Right.
laws. And so, for those who don't know, essentially what that means is if I have a client who I have reasonable knowledge that they are going to go kill themselves, I'm obligated to intervene on that. Just like if I have someone and I am aware that they are planning on or intending to kill another person, I need to intervene on that. Legally, I actually have to.
Sure.
And so this ERPO is interesting because as a provider, right, if I'm working with someone high risk, we're going to be doing all type of safety planning anyways, and we're going to talk about
Certainly.
firearms, right? And that's the part where then I've sometimes collaborated with clients of, okay, can your dad take this? Can your brother? Can your wife hold on to the key? Like whatever we need to do.
Certainly.
And maybe that's good enough, right? Like, do I still, and this is not a question I have a super great answer for. This is kind of the gray area of this ERPO is, do I still have an obligation there? And it's
Exactly.
different, right? If I have a client who says, I'm going to go kill my ex wife, and then they won't engage with me around risk reduction with that.
Right.
Or, there's a lot more nuance to it. So,
Yeah, I believe in, yeah, that's exactly right. Because, if someone says they're going to go do something, say it's a positive, yeah, I'm going to go and I'm going to take the gun. I'm going to give it to my father or my uncle. They're going to hold on to it through this, trying time in my life, that kind of thing. And you believe, okay, well, that's what they're going to do.
hmm
You don't really have a reasonable doubt past that. And
hmm
then they do go do the awful thing. It's like, how would they come back on the therapist at that point, right? You didn't have a beyond a reasonable doubt that
hmm
that person was not, was going to do that. They had already said they had a plan set out. We're
hmm
giving it up hit this time at this place. My uncle's going to have it. And then it ends up turning bad.
That's such a great question. And so, as a provider, actually, in that scenario, I would not have upheld my clinical duty if I just trusted the client. So, what I actually have to do is we have to have collateral contact. So, okay, we need dad in here with you or on the phone with
Sure.
you. Like, I need to have some proof. Everybody is aware of this plan. They know why the plan is happening. They've agreed to the plan. Now I have reasonably intervened on this.
So it's like a Ronald Reagan's trust but verify. You got to
Yes, right.
verify the communists are not doing what they're not supposed to
Yeah,
be doing.
right.
Totally understand that,
Yeah.
and that kind of makes sense. I could see where that's sorry, but on this one, I can't just take your word for it. Like there has to be some other dynamic, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I think this gets back to that relational skill piece of even as a provider, I get to be thoughtful in how I frame that, right? And
Hmm.
so it might not be, hey, I can't just take your word on it. It might be, I care enough about you staying alive that
Right.
we're going to create a really rock solid plan around this.
Exactly.
And so when we talk about relational skills, sometimes what we're talking about, right, and therapists train in this, but even for couples, how do we say hard things or give hard feedback or have tough conversations in a way that strengthens the relationship and doesn't just kind of decimate everything?
Yeah. Do you have anything on that? Do you have maybe a piece of something that somebody could use
Mm,
to maybe open up I'm definitely not asking you to therapize everyone,
yeah.
but maybe an in as far as a question might be. This is what you could ask. You can make up your own scenario. It doesn't even have to be anything serious.
What you could ask for what?
Well, that's just it. It's like, I don't know. What would be something that someone might be going through? I know in my own life, I'm putting too many hours in right now, and
Hmm.
that's about to change. But say it's could be something simple as pet peeves, like, hey, the male's not putting the toilet seat back down like he's supposed to, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Because I think that's just common courtesy. It could really be anything,
Okay.
something
I
like
get
that,
it.
even something.
Mhm. I totally get it. So I think there's a few things we can do. A, we can focus on observable behavior.
Sure,
So the place people tend to get caught first that I see is they start interpreting or assigning meaning to rather than just talking about the thing, right? So it's one thing to
right,
say, hey, listen, I saw that you left the toilet seat up again. Observable behavior, right?
sure,
It's another to say, clearly you don't respect me because you left the
right.
toilet seat up again.
Or you left the toilet seat up again. Does that mean you're leaving me?
Yes, right, exactly,
They're
exactly.
completely off the left field, well, I guess he's leaving because he left the toilet seat up again.
Yes, right, right. So focus on observable behavior. And then I think there's a place for giving the benefit of the doubt,
Sure.
right? So let's say you've had this
Some grace.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Let's say you've had this conversation a million times, right? It's easy to come in of how dare you? We've talked about this 500 times. Why aren't
Exactly.
you listening? Rate it in.
Yep.
Hey, I'm sure it was an oversight. Are you aware that you did this?
Right. And that's actually something really, really interesting of not that I wanted to cut you off,
No,
but
you're good.
in my own life, I've noticed that when I start observing what I do,
Mhm,
man, there's some really cool breakthroughs that happen because it's like, okay, I didn't realize I'd done this and I didn't realize I acted that way. And
mhm,
I didn't realize I'm doing this all the time. That kind of thing is actually very freeing when you're able to honestly assess and examine, as Socrates says, an unexamined life is not worth living, to
mhm,
examine the things that you do
mhm.
that may be having your own detrimental effect upon yourself. A lot of times they always say, you're your own worst enemy, which is
Yeah.
probably true in many cases. It's amazing that just when you observe, especially yourself, not looking out towards other people,
Yep.
but yourself, it's amazing the kinds of breakthroughs that you will see happen.
Very much so. And I think that's such a good point because that is typically the first task as a couples
Hmm.
therapist that I encounter is
Sure.
couples can come in so focused on each other and what they want the
Yes.
other one to do different that they have completely lost track of
Sure.
themselves and are no longer containing themselves, maintaining themselves, even behaving respectfully.
Exactly.
And so the first thing we work on is okay, get back on your side of the line. And now, how are you going to change you? Because actually, you have no ability to change that.
No. And you barely have any ability to change yourself in many cases.
Takes a lot of
That's
work.
exactly. It takes a ton of work, and that's probably one of the reasons that people don't want to do it. They really like to hear the positive thing about themselves, like
Yeah.
you were saying. It's a very slight, small sliver of narcissism, I'm sure. But then the other one is just like, I don't want to change. Like, I've
Mhm.
always been this way. This is who I am. Like, I feel like my personality is being crushed down, or my spirit. That's another
Mhm.
that's always good, right? Well, I just have this spirit inside me, and that's how I am. It's
Mhm.
like, well, that's probably detrimental. Like,
Mhm.
I tell people a lot, and I'm like, I'm good in small doses, small, because I can talk your ear off about the most mundane, stupid shit you've ever heard in your life that people don't care about.
Mm.
Don't care about any of that stuff. And I'm really bad at that. So I'm like, I'm good in small doses. And when you find that out about yourself, it's freeing, because then you kind of understand why after 10, 15, maybe 50 seconds of talking to someone, you get the
Sure.
gloss
Yeah.
and they don't. Like, you're like, well, what happened to them? Well, they went away because they're not talking to you no more. They're thinking about what they're going to have for dinner or who they're going to talk to next. It might be a little less intense than you are.
Right. Well, I think there's something to that, right? Of that ability to
Yes.
know who we
It happened to
are.
me.
Yeah, right. Very much so. Know who we are, but then be able to divorce meaning from that, right? I think the place
Uh-huh.
people get trapped is, oh, that means I'm bad, versus like,
Right.
it's fine. Like,
What usually happens in my case is they ask me a question I might have known a little bit of something about, and then bam, off to the races we go. That's what usually happens.
right. And so, okay, so this is a therapist trick, right? I'll warn friends about this. I'll warn clients about this. I'll be like, hey, here are the things you need to know about me, right? And then it's the quirks, right?
Right.
So if it doesn't make sense, if I'm doing this, or this, just tell me. It's fine.
Right. Radical honesty.
Yes, right. Radical honesty and then responsibility, right? It's inviting that feedback of, yep, if this isn't tracking, if it doesn't land well for you, let me know, we'll figure it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, I'm about to be real vulnerable. So that kind of stuff, and this brings back memories back a long time ago. Now, my wife and I have been together 18 years. This past August, she met me on August the 25th, Sadie Hawkins Day. Not really, but she asked me out. It's
Mhm.
a great story. We love the story. She loves the story. I think it's amazing. But like in the very beginning, like, we'd been married before.
Mhm.
I had issues. I had no idea I was acting the way that I was, to be
Mm,
quite honest.
yeah.
And we went through 3 different marriage counselors before we found somebody we were comfortable enough with being vulnerable with.
Mhm.
And to this day, I still credit his teaching, what he taught us, and how he taught us to communicate as the reasons why we're still together. But like the first two guys, the first guy was actually trying to hit on my wife. The second guy just didn't know any idea of what he was doing. Like, he was kind of really, really, over his head, especially with us.
Mhm.
And then the third gentleman was a pretty nice, Christian guy, was kind of part of our faith and kind of what we were trying to do. And like the first, I don't know, 4 sessions, I completely bullshitted the guy, like 100%.
Yeah.
Like, I lied. Oh yeah, this is what's going on. This is, I'm a great guy. And he really, I never forget, he asked me a question, and I was like, well, my first marriage, the way that this all came about was my ex mother-in-law was treated like a demigod
Mhm.
in the family. And he's like, tell me a little bit more about that. And I had no idea he was therapying me, right? I had no
Right.
idea.
Yeah.
So he's like, what's your level of education? And I said, well, I was a high school dropout at the time. I was getting ready to take my GED at like 31 years old, 32. And he says, the reason I ask is, it's a pretty lofty word. He's like, there's not very many people that know what the word demigod means. And he's like, describe it to me. And I said, well, she's part person, she's part God. She's goddess. I said, she was worshipped by her family. And I said, that kind of stuff just never felt right with me. It's like, literally, I felt like that men were nothing to her and women were everything.
Mm,
And I said, so that was kind of a weird dichotomy to go through. And he gave me a compliment, and I act like he never said it. And I didn't realize I couldn't accept the compliment.
mm,
Like, and that was like 32 years old. And I knew that I had problems saying goodbye to people if I left, or I would just kind of mill away or whatever.
mhm.
I didn't know it was like that for me. I didn't know
Mm.
that I couldn't take a compliment. And there
Yeah.
had to be some deep seated reason why. And, through not having a great relationship with my mom at the time, not having a great relationship with my sister, who was 10 years, younger than me,
Mhm.
and then having an ex-wife, I was like, he's like, you have some misogynistic tendencies. And I don't know if it's exactly the word you want to hear, but that's something you can come back from.
Mm,
But you've had a lot of negative emotion a lot of negativity that has happened around females. Not that they've done it to you, just the fact that it's happened. And he goes, it has had a pretty deep seated thing. And the reason that you're being this way towards your wife, she's the only female that's near you.
Mm,
And my wife and I are like really, really tight knit.
mhm,
So like we spent a lot of time at the house back in when I was doing a certain job. I didn't do what I do now. But I was like, you know what? I mean, the light bulb literally went
mm,
off. I had no idea I was being that way. And I'm like, you know what? I want to work on that because that actually seems to be that might be like 90% of the problem here.
yeah,
And I had no idea it was me. I
mhm,
wanted to do what you were just mentioning, push it off on somebody else. It had to be this, it had to be that. And if the guy's still out there, if he's still alive, his name was John. He was a great guy.
mhm,
And he, to his credit, he kind of unraveled the knot that was inside of me at that time in my life. And he's the reason that my wife and I are still together
yeah,
because he really shed a lot of light on what was happening. Pun intended. See, your last name's Light. It's like it was very surprising to me. Like, okay, well, maybe there is something to this because it really took me accepting to go to a therapist first. And then, like I said, we went through at least four, had to be four scheduled appointments. And when we went home one night, my wife's like, that stuff you were telling him is like, any of that true? And I'm like, you know what? Probably right. I don't think it was. Like, that was a lot of bullshit. And it was very surprising and very freeing to me. Like, yeah, okay, well, that started to work through that and have better relationships with females in my life and that type of thing. And have done everything I can to make it that way now.
mhm,
And it's been way better.
yeah,
And being able to communicate, it taught us a lot of communication skills. We both read, I can't remember what it's called now. It was The Five Love Languages, which was really big back when we went. And it is a great book. It's got some really good techniques in it that
mhm,
helps you really communicate and unravel maybe what the other person was thinking in a certain gesture.
right.
Do you have any literature that you've written? And also, do you have any books that you might be writing at some point in your life?
So you are not the first person to ask me about a book. No, I have not written a book. I am not in the process. Everybody tells me this is a thing I should do. And I don't know, some part of me is resistant to that at this point in time.
I can understand it. It's a ton of work from what people have, people that I've overheard say it online. Even if they self-publish, it's definitely a lot of work. Or if they get a publisher, it's still a year and a half to 2 years before they even start to market it, which is kind of crazy in my eyes because you're so far past the curve sometimes of things that might be hot in the modern mass media that
Mhm.
it's just going to miss. Like,
Right.
it's like there's a timing component to that it really needs to hit like at the right time. I've listened to a ton of Peterson over the years, different stuff, and like it's wild watching him and like Dad Sad kind of have this meteoric rise because they've been very good at like being just ahead of that wave
Mhm.
to get a book published and
Mhm.
get it out there where people can go and buy it. Go, okay, maybe it's not the second coming,
Yeah.
but it's good stuff that people can use a lot of. That I would definitely wanted to ask the question to find out if there were some papers maybe that you've been part of, if there were some things that you'd written, and certainly, a book.
Yeah. So not a book. I've been on a number of podcasts now, so people can hear me
Hmm.
there. I was doing a blog for a bit for a local
Sure.
pelvic floor physical therapist. So
Hmm.
there's some stuff on my website about sex and different sexual health things there. Have the podcasts. People can find me kind of sprinkled at various conferences doing some different things.
Sure. Do you do a lot of travel?
Not a ton. So I kind of split my time professionally. So
Uh-huh.
I see clients both at private practice and this contract position. I'm actually a supervisor as a therapist, which is a whole other process for us. So
Sure.
I spend some time supervising folks who are training to become therapists. So I spend time doing that. And then I do some of this mental health stuff in the
Gotcha.
automotive world. So I'll be at ASTA, I'll be at Apex, and then I'll be at Super Saturday this fall here.
Sadly, unable to make any of those places.
That
I
is
really I
sad.
was trying to actually make it to ASTA this year.
Yeah.
Coming back from Wyoming and being out there 2.5 years, is really the only thing that's close is Vision in
Mm,
Kansas City. There's some other things I'm sure that are out there. I'm just not aware of them. But Yeah, there's been a couple different people I've had on the podcast who've asked, yeah, come to ASTA. It's awesome. And I'm sure it is. There's just no way I can get off to actually go there. I am a lot closer now, a whole lot closer.
So
I'm
it's
within
maybe
just a
realm of
car drive now.
possibility. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. I would like to try to set something up to at least come there next year. There's quite a
Mm,
few people that, I mean, I've not really been in the same circles with. However, our backgrounds are similar as far as
sure.
at least in the industry, like working on vehicles, having our own businesses at certain points in our life, that type of thing. And then definitely training. So now I've been February this year, be 3 years that I've trained young students
Yeah.
between the ages of 18, 16. Really, there was a couple students I've had that was as young as 16,
Mhm.
all the way up to 48 years old. So far,
Yeah. What's the part that you see when you're working with them that's the hardest?
me, I see me. And I
Meaning?
was very difficult. I was very difficult when I was
Yeah.
that age, very obstinate, never diagnosed with any of that kind of thing. I mean, I
Mhm.
didn't really, my parents, I stayed enough out of trouble that a court never had me diagnosed. Let's put it that way. But there was tons of obstinate, that type of stuff. I was very obstinate to any type of authority whatsoever. And now when it's like I'm trying to steer them in a better direction where like a little bit of authority can really open up where you can go
Yeah.
in the industry, especially, it's difficult dealing with me. So
Mhm.
that's what I take from it. It's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding to do that type of work, and especially to work with the youth. And really, it's the least amount that I can do for the industry that's kept the roof over my head and kept food in my belly all these years. I like to leave it better than I found it.
Yeah. It's an interesting role. I even think about, right, as a supervisor trying to support young
Hmm.
therapists through that training process of
Sure.
really thinking about where is this person right now? Where would they need to get to be able to do this well? And then, right,
Exactly.
like you're saying, if it's kind of mixed motivation or they don't understand or there's some resistance or something, it's an
Home
interesting,
life
yeah.
kicks in. They get sick. Happens quite a bit.
Right, right. Yeah, it's an interesting place about, okay, how do we guide someone? And yet that limitation.
It's a strange new calculus that I'm working myself through.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a totally different skill set.
100% agree.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very much so.
So what do you think? Has it been fun?
It has been fun. This has been enjoyable. I hope it's been helpful.
Yeah, I hope the audience gets a lot out of it. I think they will. I try to always at least tie back into a lot of the things that maybe I'm thinking that people out there don't have a much help with. They don't get to see, every day. It's not comedy all the time. It's not fun all the time, but these are life things that people really need to pay attention to.
Yeah, very much so. Well, I appreciate you being willing to talk about this. When we think about like for the industry, what can we do to
Hmm.
help kind of address what's happening for folks? Even just normalizing these discussions is a huge part of it. And I think therapy or seeking help or even couples work can be this big scary thing like, ooh, this therapist is gonna sit and assess us and judge us and tell us everything
Right.
we do wrong.
With the clipboard
Yeah, right,
watching.
right, right.
Go on. Go on. Tell
Yeah,
me more.
yeah, right,
Yeah,
and, like, we do, and
exactly.
we're also just people who wanna help.
Exactly. Yeah, we're human beings too.
Right.
So I think it's a really good place to cut it off, but um, only if you commit to coming back on at some point in the future. We can collaborate, come up with a couple more topics that we might talk about, and do another hour sometime.
Of course, anytime.
Sounds great. Everyone, Margaret Light with Equilibrium Therapy Services.